Bezier Curves, these fun little things you get in your image editing software that, well, have a very interesting control method and basically allow you to draw very nice smooth curves. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna actually take a closer look at these curves just to see how they operate and, well, what we can do with them. All this and more on Bezier Curves after the break. Hello and welcome to another Random Wednesday episode. So let's actually start by taking a look at what a curve is and how we actually interact with it. What I'm about to show you is actually a program written by me in Java. Basically, when I was in school last semester, we covered Bezier Curves at one point of time. And one of the things we had to do was to actually implement it in a programming language. So, well, I sort of took things a little bit further than the assignment let us do. And well, that's how I came up with this tool. Anyway, in most image editing programs, you get something that looks like this. Basically, you have a curve and you have these little controls that you can actually drag around. However, there's actually one additional step of complication in this particular method, which is why I'm gonna start by showing you the more basic form. At its simplest, a Bezier curve is something like this. You have a bunch of control points. These control points will actually determine what the curve looks like. Now, this in itself is actually already a very interesting concept. In fact, take a look at these animations from Wikipedia. Notice how the control points actually form an outside, and by taking sort of an average between each of these sides, you actually form your actual curve. In fact, that is basically how it works. Now, I'm going to show you some math. Don't panic and don't stop this video just yet. I'll try to explain as we go along. This is the simplest version of the Bezier curve formula. Now, P0, P1, and P2 actually refer to the positions of these control points. T is our running variable. It's going to start at 0 and it's going to increase slowly until it goes to 1. So basically, here's what we do. We start with T equals to 0. And basically, well, it's going to wipe out certain terms in the actual expression and we're going to end up with a position. In fact, in this case, what we're going to end up with is just P0. Now, as T increases, notice what's happening. If we can imagine P0, P1, and P2 as three different points that will influence the final output point, well, notice the influence of P0 going down and the influence of the other two going up. Somewhere in the middle, the influence of P1 starts going down, and when we go all the way to the end, all we have that is influencing the result is just P2. And in a nutshell, that is how a Bezier curve is drawn. Basically, we don't really care where P0, P1, or P2 are. They can be anywhere, but the idea remains the same, and that is the amount of influence they have on the final result varies over time. Now, there are many equations that can be used to actually draw a Bezier curve. The one we just looked at is the quadratic equation, and that is, well, basically you use 3 points to draw a curve. The version you're looking at in this program is actually the cubic version, which makes use of 4 control points instead. The equation is almost exactly the same, just a little bit more complicated because, of course, now we have one more point that is possibly influencing the curve. So I hope you're still okay at this point. I hope you're not too lost. I definitely hope the math isn't overwhelming you because hopefully I've explained it okay. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna actually try and extend this concept. You realize that if we were to use a quadratic or cubic curve, well, we kinda cannot do a lot because, well, that is the entire curve right there. What if we want to actually create a huge curve that spans quite a big distance? I mean, of course, if you want to use 12 control points, you can technically implement a Bezier curve to the 12th order, but that's not entirely practical. The reason for that is you have to rewrite the equation every time you want to draw a Bezier curve with a different number of control points, so that's not practical. Instead, to do what I'm doing on screen right now, all we really need to do is to take a whole bunch of Bezier curves of a particular order and just stick them back to back. So if you watch my cursor right now, I'm basically showing you the first Bezier curve. These 4 control points determine the first Bezier curve. Now, notice this last control point. This also acts as the first control point of the next Bezier curve, which takes up these 4 points. And that is basically how we string up a whole bunch of Bezier curves together, and the result will look like one large curve. One last concept before I let you go. Notice how there might be a little problem. Watch as I move this particular control point out of the way. Notice how this kinda destroys your curve because now there is a sharp edge. This is the reason why some programs using Bezier curves don't actually allow you to manipulate each control point like that. Instead, your controls are presented in this particular format, which I'm sure is sort of more familiar to you. In fact, if your controls are in this format, this is what's going on. Basically, every dot along the way is actually a control point. However, notice how these 2 control points must move in relation to each other. Basically, the angle and distance from one control point to the middle and from the middle to the other control point must be the same. Now I'm going to switch back to my original mode. Notice how basically when I have things almost in line, the curve looks good. The curve looks smooth at that point. However, once I start to violate that rule, either by changing the distance or by actually changing its angle, notice how the curve now has an ugly bend at that particular point. Now I don't want to go into too much detail when it comes to, the actual mathematical aspect, so all I'm gonna say is this. This is a concept known as continuity. And basically, in order for these 2 curves to appear smooth or continuous, to use the proper term, we're gonna have to follow the rule, and that is, these 2 control points must be the same distance and angle away from the center point. And there you have it. I hope you have a better insight now into how, a Bezier curve works in the background. Oftentimes when we're editing our images or our 3D meshes, we don't think so much about how this works. So hopefully this was insightful to actually see things from the actual mathematical and implementation standpoint. Anyway, that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV. Hello! If you enjoyed this video, don't forget I appreciate every like, favorite, and comment you give me. If you'd like to see more from me in the future, don't forget to subscribe. For more updates outside of YouTube, do follow my official Twitter account at 0612 TV. And if you'd like to see more of my work, you can also check out my About Me page. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV.